Welcome to this super exciting episode of Freed From Feminism. We could not be more honored to have interviewed Dr. Carrie Gress, author of the phenomenal book we'll talk about on today's episode called The Anti-Mary Exposed: Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. Dr. Gress is a homeschooling mother of four, earned a doctorate in philosophy from the Catholic University of America, and is the editor at the online women's magazine Theology of Home. She's written for numerous publications, including National Review and The Catholic Thing, and is a frequent guest on many domestic and international news broadcasts such as BBC, Fox, EWTN, and Shalom World Television. Apart from her brilliant advocacy for a return to femininity through the example of the Blessed Mother, she is, as you'll see, a kind, thoughtful, and intelligent woman, and was certainly an example to us of how to deliver our message of being freed from feminism in a gentle, loving, yet truthful way. Thanks so much for watching today, and we hope you enjoy our interview with Dr. Gress, and please do check out the show notes for links to her fabulous books we discuss in our conversation. God bless. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Freed From Feminism. We are incredibly excited today because we have the amazing Dr. Carrie Gress with us. And as you just heard on our introduction, she is a rock star for this movement that we're talking about. So we are just thrilled to have you. And we thank you for being on our podcast today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. It's fun to join you.
Thank you. Well, I think we'll just go ahead and start firing questions at you.
All right.
If that's okay.
I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll ask the first question, and my question is really based off of if our listeners ever read your book, it's absolutely fabulous, and it talks a lot about the harmful effects of second wave feminism, and the different mainly the gravest evil being abortion coming out of it. And so I was wondering if you've ever done any research on your own that you didn't include in your book about first wave feminism and what you think about that.
Yeah. I actually am embarrassed to say I haven't done a lot of research on it. It's something that I want to dig into more because my bachelor's degree is in intellectual history. And I remember going back and looking at women like Mary Wollstonecraft and just seeing all of these trends that happen with women, and certainly what we see with first wave feminism. But I'm absolutely taken with the idea of, what happened during the Protestant Reformation and how much of feminism is really a reaction to that. Because if you look at Protestantism, they threw out Mary, they threw out religious orders for women, and they threw out female saints. So really what is left as far as helping your average woman or theologically minded woman, how can she help navigate all of these difficulties that certainly we find in scripture? But, all of those sort of guardrails that we had, certainly Mary as a model and whatnot, if those are gone, then what's happening? And of course, we know that men were sort of put on this theological pedestal in a way that was different than a priest, because they didn't have the same kind of authority. They were also married. And so that you can sort of almost see feminism really being set up where the woman's faith is really navigated only through kind of a masculine model because the feminine was gone. So it sort of created this vacuum. So that's really an area I'm anxious to dig into more, because I think that there's so much that came out of that led to either partial truths or just different ways that women didn't understand themselves. And I've encountered this. There's a great woman that writes. She went to theological college that had Protestants and Catholics there, and she describes, this experience that she has with Protestant women, that they don't have any idea what she's talking about half the time, because they don't have this experience of the saints or Mary to really understand themselves through that lens. So I think that piece has been really corrosive, and that story hasn't been told properly yet. And that's something that I would really like to get into, because then I think the pieces of first wave feminism will make sense in light of that, because you have these sort of partial truths, or, every denomination is also sort of interpreting scripture the way that they want to as well. So anyway, I think that's an interesting piece that, like I said, I'd love to really dig into further. And I think that there's going to be a lot of rich ideas that are going to help us see even more why that, all of this has happened in the last century.
I love that you mentioned that, because I've dove into it a little bit myself, and we've actually talked on our podcast some about how, secular society says first, second, third wave, maybe fourth wave feminism,
Right.
but
Right.
it can almost be traced back to that Protestant Reformation, and especially with that lack of Mary,
Yes, absolutely. And I think, and that's always what I come back to, is just, the fact that Mary is, this whole movement is a reaction against her, and yet she's the one that has given us the sense of that we're equal in the first place. That is the irony behind all of it, to me, is sort of this rejection of true womanhood, because of the fact that it doesn't fit in with their desire for true womanhood to look like maleness, the masculine. So yeah, there's all kinds of inconsistencies there. But and I think that was one of the other things that was really motivating all of my research was, I have a PhD in philosophy, and so I was looking for sort of intellectual threads and trends that would point to sort of real intellectual underpinnings behind a lot of these ideas. And I just didn't find them. I kept digging and digging, and you just find sort of a lot of emotionalism, a lot of ideologies, a lot of kind of bankrupt ideas, even a lot of sort of bullying. And I think that that's one of the things that most of us are unaware of. We think that if we dig deep enough, there's got to be some sort of traction, some sort of logic to all this. And it's just not there. So I think that these are sort of deep roots that we're just now beginning to dig through.
I think that will be a fascinating next book for you.
Yes.
Because that everything you're saying, at least anecdotally from my perspective as a Protestant convert, it is very much true. It is so that's why Protestant converts have such a hard time with Mary when they convert to Catholicism. That's, I mean, how many examples do we have to show of Protestants who don't enter the church specifically because of
her.
Mary, and that's always the biggest stumbling block. And on the other side, it's so much of the beauty of Catholicism. And once you actually know what she's about and are not threatened by her anymore, it opens a whole new world for you. So
no, that's absolutely right. And as a revert, I think it's only recently I've really kind of put my ear to the ground to listen to Protestant converts, and just all the struggles that they had within their marriages, within their understanding of themselves as a woman. Those are things that I haven't had to deal with, kind of those distortions. And yet the more I pay attention, the more I'm hearing just there was real struggles and this real animosity that and wounds that I think are driving a lot of feminism, because they're saying we're not getting the answers within Christianity, but they've got to be somewhere. So we must be finding them in feminism. And so it's this real struggle, again, because they kind of only have half the truth. And that's not satisfying for anyone. So I think that's been interesting to just kind of look at it from that angle as well.
Absolutely. So moving on to second wave feminism, what do you think, besides maybe this is your answer, Betty Friedan and her book, what kind of sparked the second wave? How did we get from suffragette, movement to the second wave? And then maybe could you talk a little bit, you mentioned it very briefly in your book, about how communism at least helped along, or maybe even created that second wave.
Yeah. No, I think that there's all kinds of tentacles that went into this. I mean, this was no accident that this happened. I think, first off, you look at just the crumbling of society because of the Second World War and the massive amount of destruction that happened there, both in Europe, but also just in people's sort of general attitudes of, let's eat, drink, and be merry because we really might be dead tomorrow. But also just this, I think the way that parents are raising their children, you can sort of see this leftover, with baby boomers, this idea that the parents really wanted to give their children a better life than they had. I mean, this so-called greatest generation, and they were incredibly amazing people until it came to raising their own children. And it, again, was because they wanted to give their children so much that they gave up a lot of the morals and the religion and all of these different pieces. That is what had held them together. Didn't realize how vital those were. So you have this sort of generation of boomers who come along and think that the whole world really revolves around them. And so anyway, you have all these interesting pieces, and then of course communism, Marxism is just huge, and that was a really amazing piece to discover. All of these ideas would come to me, and for like 3 days I would have a new idea, and I would just sit and think, how did we miss this? How have we not seen that? How did I miss this all these years? So I can only imagine what the experience is like reading the whole book, from one chapter to the next, because of course I had months and months to digest these ideas. But in 1917, Our Lady talks about at Fatima, she revealed that Russia would spread her lies. She did not convert. And I think most of us think about communism more in economic terms. And, since the fall of the Soviet Union, we sort of feel like, okay, we've dodged that bullet. And yet I think what Our Lady actually meant was this idea that's very deep within Karl Marx and all the communist efforts, is this idea to sort of create a new man and a new woman, to abolish the family. And so, you've got these outsiders, these Bolsheviks that come into the Soviet Russia, and they're sort of saddling the Russian people with this. These people had such rich families and traditions, and in order to get rid of it, they had to set up the gulags and there was all kinds of violence that had to happen to get rid of really what was authentically part of the fabric of the Russian culture. And so they introduced divorce, no-fault divorce. They introduced abortion on demand, all of these kinds of things and also children were sort of carted off to be raised by other people. And so they were creating these ideal workers was the idea that didn't have these strings to family and weren't these emotional attachments and things that they saw as really damaging to their utopia. So what's fascinating is to see how much these ideas are happening back in the 1920s, 1930s in Soviet Russia. Well, if you take those basic ideas, the destruction of the family, abortion on demand, the divorce, no-fault divorce, all of these kinds of things, you can see that we took them on really just entirely in the 1960s and 70s, in a way that the Russians didn't. The Russians knew that it was coming from an outsider, but we sort of took it on because of the fact that it was presented to us in a very savvy way by women like certainly Betty Friedan. She was not herself. She was intellectually savvy. She was not an attractive woman. But Gloria Steinem, you have all these women who were incredibly attractive, and they knew how to work the media. I mean, TV was brand new, and they used it to their advantage to really spread these ideas out dramatically. You have Helen Gurley Brown, who started Cosmo magazine, which was supposed to be just the female version of Playboy. She just copied it to a T. So it's fascinating to see how, it wasn't outsiders that came in and forced this upon the United States, or the West, but it was actually women who knew how to use the media and magazines and visuals, and all of these things to really spread their ideas. But even among all the divisions that there were, you've got someone like Kate Millett, who was very intellectual, and she's promoting feminism on an intellectual level. And then Helen Gurley Brown, of course, is using a very sensual, sexual version of it. They're not going to agree on anything except when it comes to abortion. And so that was really the glue that kind of tied the whole movement together, even if they had huge disagreements on all kinds of other things. And we can see this even today in the Women's March. Who's welcome there? Anybody, unless you're pro-life. And then, get out, take your hat off. So anyway, it's pretty amazing to sort of see just how quickly we took this on, but at the same time to see the roots of it are really in communism, that we were trying to create this new woman who wasn't, her children weren't an obstacle to her. I mean, that's one of the biggest lies, is that our children are an obstacle to our happiness and our careers. She wasn't saddled to a man or the family. So it really is this goal being the career woman, which is exactly what the goal was in Soviet Russia. So it's amazing to see this pattern emerge.
I had no idea that Cosmo was supposed to be the girl version of Playboy.
Yeah, no,
That's
it was
really
exact
interesting.
copy. Yeah, no, that was really the goal. I know she consulted with Hugh Hefner and even used the same agents that he did in terms of getting writers for Cosmo. And yeah, that was by design for sure.
Speaking of that, Beth, can I just ask her to tell that story about the table in her book? Because this would be such an awesome story.
Yeah,
Do you mind?
Yeah, go for it.
Can you tell us? It's the story is in your book, which again we everyone must buy it. It's absolutely fantastic. It will change your life. It changed mine. But you tell this story about second wave feminism in your book, about how all these magazine editors got around one table and literally had a litany, said a litany about how they're going to ruin the family. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, actually it was before they, not all of them were editors, but they're all sort of the grandmothers of feminism. So yeah, there were 12 women, and they were, Kate Millett was one of them. They met in New York, and this was probably the early 70s. And I got these stories from Mallory Millett, who's talking about her sister Kate. Since Kate has passed away, Mallory's been free to sort of tell her story more liberally. And anyway, so she talks about how they would get together. Kate was deeply Marxist, and basically they would say this litany, where the real goal was, how do we start this revolution? We have to get rid of the patriarch. We have to get rid of monogamy. We have to get rid of the family. It's in the book. It's really quite chilling when you look at it, because the last line is, how are we going to do this? And the way that they saw that to do it was to promote eroticism, prostitution, abortion, divorce, homosexuality. And at that time, this is again early 1970s, abortion's still illegal. They probably thought that this was just this pipe dream, and yet if you look at where we are at right now, all of those things have been normalized and more, far beyond their wildest imaginings of what they could have done to destroy the family and to destroy men and to destroy all of us, really, with this deep ideology. So yeah, it's pretty harrowing when you see really what their goal was from the very beginning, and then to just see how successful they were in executing this. And it was also, it was done through television shows and through radio shows and through magazines like Cosmo and Hollywood films. And even Cosmo had the Cosmo Girl, and this woman were fictitious stories about her. Sue Ellen Browder has written a book on this, because she wrote for Cosmo for 20 years, and she said that the Cosmo Girl could do anything she wanted in the world. She could have these high flying adventures, and the only restrictions were that she could not be a mother and she could not be a virgin. So it's pretty amazing when you see what is specifically being targeted, not just by Cosmo, but by the whole movement: virginity and motherhood. And of course, Our Lady is the Virgin Mother. So it's very striking when you sort of see the language and what's being very specifically targeted, even if it's unwitting, even if they didn't know they were targeting the Virgin Mother. These are the values. And why is that? Because these are the ways in which women have always established their relationship with God. They go deeper either through the call of virginity or through the call of motherhood. This is how they are connected and brought closer to God. So Satan, the grand conspirator, knows that if he destroys those aspects of womanhood, then it's very difficult for us to find God, and then we give up. And if he takes us out, he takes out the men, he takes out the children. It's very easy for him to get to everybody else. We saw that in the Garden of Eden. He went for Eve first, for a very specific reason. So all of these things are connected in remarkable ways, I think.
Yeah. All right. So to move on to the next question, to talk a little bit more about the contents of your book besides the history, one of the sections that I actually really enjoyed from my work experience was how you talk about women at work and how they interact with each other. Because a lot of feminists talk about complementarity between men and women, which is, our Catholic teaching, but they use it to say that, oh, we need men and women at work, and that'll be the best, environment for a business to succeed, because women are going to bring love and patience and care to that workplace. But you laugh, right? And if our listeners have read the book, it's ironic, because in the end, women end up being the most competitive and petty with each other. So could you talk a little bit about that and the research that you did?
Yeah, no, that was a fascinating piece for me to sort of dig through, because, I've been a woman for a long time, and I, remember growing up both being on the receiving end of, the mean girl treatment, but also on the delivering end of mean girl. It's sort of built into us one way or another, and it doesn't end there. And there's a book called Warriors and Worriers that I recommend all the time. And that was really kind of what helped me start thinking about this idea more deeply, of just the way that men operate and the way that women operate. And the men sort of use a much more like military hierarchy kind of understanding. So even if there's a man that's not the alpha male, but he still has something to contribute, they will find a way to pull that contribution and include him in the group, that, he's not just cast aside. But women, on the other hand, model themselves much more on a sort of democratic model, where everybody has to sort of be the same. And if somehow you are more gifted in other ways or get more attention or something, then there's this sort of sense of, we got to rein that in. You're threatening all of us by being this outlier. And so this woman that wrote the book, Joyce Benesford is her name. It's published by Oxford University Press. She did all these sociological studies, really around the world, and it's very thorough but fascinating, because it just rang true so deeply. That I think feminism has promoted this idea that there's this sisterhood that we should all have, and we hear this repeated often. Madeleine Albright speaking about how, we have to vote for other women, and just this idea that, again, women have these capacities to sort of heal the culture in a way that men don't. And yet, if we look at kind of the underbelly of the whale, you see that this sisterhood is really can be very superficial thing. And, one of the pieces that I loved the most was that when two women are in conflict with each other, the way that they mask it is just to smile more at each other. Your smile gets bigger and you get happier and you're more, anyway, and you're laughing because this experience that, we all have, that I can't believe that you're in front of me and I have to talk to you. And I'm just going to keep smiling and, get beyond this situation. So anyway, it's been interesting. I've actually had a lot of men thank me for laying this out, because they could never figure it out, what was going on. But we all have sort of anecdotal evidence of hearing about this. I know one friend of mine runs a big office, and he would just talk about how the younger woman would come in, and then as they would get older, they would have all this irritation against the new women, because they were no longer the shiny, new, attractive women getting all the attention. They were just the women that had been there for 20 years and everybody was used to them, and they were no longer sort of the it girls. And so there was all this tension between the older women and the new women. And anyway, all of these things, I think, we know from our experiences being women, happen all the time. And yet that's not what we're called to, of course. And this is obviously one of the deep flaws of feminism, is just the fact that it puts us on a pedestal, but on a pedestal with these incredible vices that have no way of being turned into virtues. And of course, this is what we see with Christianity, is that these vices can be turned into virtues. We have this capacity to be very dialed into other people and their emotion and their needs and how we can help them. And so instead of using them as a destructive force, we have the capacity to use them as a healing or, life-giving force. But it's very hard to do that if you don't have any role models or people around you that are doing that. And that's really where we're at right now, is that it's incredibly hard to find good women represented in the culture who know how to use that as a virtue instead of just manipulating others through this viciousness that we have kind of inborn into us.
Beth, anything else?
No, I mean, I'm just sitting here agreeing with everything you said because I've just seen it so much in the workplace that, I mean, sometimes it's really nice to have another girl around but it's usually more of a peer. If somebody's close to your age through the same experiences,
Right.
But as you try to, I guess, move up the ranks, or if you're in competition with that peer, it just
watch out.
Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't even seem like they're trying to be mean, but you can tell behind it all that they want to stay at the top and they don't want you to come and knock them off. So
no, and I think that's just it from the very beginning. If you look at Eve, she's and part of this is I say we're hardwired for this because we're weaker than men physically, but also because of the fact that we do have children, and when you have a child, you can't leave the child to go work and do other things of your own will anymore. You have to take care of that child. And so women have been conditioned to sort of figure out, how can I still get benefits for myself and my child? And historically it was done by getting a good husband and sort of creating that environment. And yet now when you pull that piece away, what's it going to turn into? It's just this, sort of this constant cat fight happening, but this again, if you look at the cure to this, it's knowing that God is our Father, knowing that we're loved, because often what we're trying to get is just more stuff so that we don't feel so vulnerable, or more respect or more fame or esteem or whatever. But if you know that you're well and deeply loved by God the Father, and everything that happens in your life is allowed to happen for a reason, then suddenly those battles don't happen, and suddenly that friction doesn't exist, and you can sort of look at the people around you in a very different light. And that's, of course, just the huge missing piece that we need to hear so desperately.
It's beautiful.
And I don't know if anyone's done research on this. I'm sure they have, about it's extremely politically incorrect to even ask this question, but I would like to know what the rates of adultery have done since women have entered the workforce at the rate that they did, circa 50 or 60 years ago. I mean,
well, and I know there is research on the rates of adultery since the pill even, and that obviously is the other piece of the puzzle. If every woman is suddenly sexually available to every man, and there's not going to be any negative consequences from it, in terms of a child, then all of these pieces have kind of fit together, and really have been so damaging in ways that are, just under the surface, but they're really there.
So to kind of, not necessarily skip third wave, but because it speaks for itself in some ways, but we kind of want to skip to the Christian focus now. And, we've seen a lot of focus or effort to reclaim the word feminism in Christianity, specifically Catholicism, and rebrand to make it this beautiful Christian thing. Saint Joan of Arc was the original feminist, or even Mary was the original feminist. So what do you kind of think of that? And is there a Christian feminism?
Well, I mean, I would first just start by saying, I think if we look at you mentioned third wave feminism, I think we are now actually in the fourth wave of it with LGBT movement. I think it maps on exactly to the same ideology that radical feminism has used. And, you can see this with this idea of Marxism, and this, again, we're recreating the person in any way that we want. You're no longer even bound by gender. And of course, we're just going to see that getting worse as more and more people think that this is acceptable. But and the other piece is too with the LGBT movement. Instead of it being abortion per se, it's really sexual disorder that is what is binding them ideologically. So you can see this kind of similar development of feminism going from abortion to then all of a sudden morphing off into this child. Intellectual child of the LGBT movement. But as for Catholic feminism, I think this is such a muddled and hard question because there's so many people that are doing great work in the name of feminism. But I think ultimately, what I always come back to is just the fact that you've got feminism means something different pretty much for every woman. We all kind of have our own experiences of it. We all sort of define it in our own terms. And I think that has been sort of a strength of it because, and one of the reasons why people are motivated to say, oh, we can find a Catholic feminism, because they want to sort of explain to women, like, you can jump from radical feminism to pro-life feminism. Like, we're not asking you to sort of betray something intellectually about women. But I think that it's really has gotten to the point where it just means way too many things, and it's you can't. There's no way to re-embrace it. The only thing that it has in common is roughly this idea that you're pro-woman. But again, no one's been more pro-women historically than the Catholic Church. It just seems like it's adding. You're sort of, if you try to make feminism attached to Catholicism, you're not really adding anything helpful. It just ends up being kind of you're sort of leeching off of it because there's no content there. There's no philosophy there. It's almost like adding a barnacle to this giant whale. I mean, especially if you have an understanding of the intellectual tradition of the Catholic Church and on all kinds of levels, to sort of put this ideology back into it. And people will say, well, what about John Paul II? I mean, he obviously used the word new feminism. I would say two things. I think he was a great master of rhetoric, and he really understood that he needed to try and appeal to people in a place where they already were. But I also don't think that he had any idea what the roots of feminism were, all the ideological pieces. I mean, this is a man who obviously understood Marxism and understood all of these pieces, and obviously was trying to reject that and help women find their way. But again, because of all this splintering, it's just gotten to a point where it's not even beneficial to sort of go in that direction. And I think, even just to see it as a problem, feminism isn't, if my thesis is right, that it really does stem from the Protestant Reformation, it's not a problem that was reacting to Catholicism. It was a problem that was reacting to Protestantism. So it's just not even the right place to be. You don't add medicine to you don't put a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage because that's not going to work. And so it just, again, it seems like it's just you're attaching something to Catholicism that doesn't need to be there. That because we're pro-woman, but we're also pro-husband, we're also pro-baby, we're pro-family, to sort of cordon off one idea that it's exclude or like puts a status of victimhood or specialness around it. It's just not really a very Catholic idea. So yeah, you can see I have some strong opinions about this, and I think I just don't think it has been an effective way to evangelize. Maybe there are individuals who have been attracted to it, but generally speaking, because it's so what you're talking about with a Catholic type of feminism and what radical feminists are talking about, because they're so antithetical, it just seems like it's really hard to make that work in a way that's effective and changing minds of individuals or whole groups.
Yeah, I love how you said that, because I've seen that a lot where they just keep trying to reuse the word feminism because it's the only thing that people think means pro-women in our society today.
Yeah.
So if you don't say feminine or like feminism, then you don't mean you like women. So you have to use the word. But then the detriment to it is the fact that basically they take what they like about the feminist ideology and then try to fit Catholicism into it instead of
Right.
taking
Right.
what might still be good, like
Mhm.
small little nuggets from some of feminism, because, you know, little things can come out of it, and try to fit that into Catholicism instead and see if it fits. But
Yeah.
they do the reverse.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
and that's the whole problem, especially when it doesn't really have a definition. I mean, I haven't, I think that's the real struggle. And you know, there's so much evidence of the pro-womanness of Catholicism, and, you know, to sort of go back and rebrand people a feminist just because she's a woman who does something great is obviously not right either. So anyway, yeah, I think there's a lot of tentacles and issues, and it's very complicated. And I have a lot of sympathy for people who are grappling with this. But I just think it seems like a much easier way to go is just, why don't we just go with Catholicism and stick with that and focus on that instead of, again, trying to attach something that is just really outside of it. Like you would, you know, Catholic socialism, it doesn't work. You know, there's just too much baggage there that has been unfruitful.
Well, Teresa, that was kind of our next question too, was whether or not we could include anything from feminism. But I love how you say that. It's just Catholicism has it all. We don't need to throw something else into the package. We already got the greatest gift basket. We don't need anything else.
Right. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think that's a great description. So yeah, I just think it's a tremendously difficult, because again, there's been so much written on this. There's been so many different efforts to do this, but I think more of it stems from the fact that we don't have a good grasp of what it means to be a woman in the first place, or the grasp that you have is just not popular. So people are sort of trying to repackage it. How do I make this look appealing to people? But that's what's gotten us into the mess in the first place, is when you're offering a distorted version of human nature, it will never lead to happiness. So we need to go back to the things that may not be popular, like giving birth, and recognize that this is, in fact, you know, these are the ways that the women are going to be fulfilled again, rather than trying to sort of contort what's popular with what we hope will work. So.
Beth, do you want to go to the next question then?
Yeah. So we talk a lot in our podcast about how, one, we pretty much what we've talked about already is sort of facts and intellectual ideas that kind of show the dangers of feminism. But our main purpose is to encourage women to know that women are beautiful and we have a lot to offer to this world, and in what ways we can offer that best fit into Catholicism. So what would you say that would be maybe your top 3 suggestions about how women can embrace their femininity and bring that into their lives?
You know, I think that's a great question, and I took a whole second half of my book to answer this. The book is, of course, the first half is dark and painful, and the second half is hopefully light and hopeful, because I didn't want it to be one of those books where you just leave it, you know, totally depressed and despairing about the future. But it was really challenging to do this because, of course, I'm talking about Our Lady as the antidote to all this. And you know, I guess the first thing I would suggest to women is just to look at what's being attacked. What is it that has really been focused on in this culture, and see that that's what's on the other side. Why is that being attacked? And again, it always comes back to this idea of virginity and motherhood. These are the two things that are being attacked in the culture. So then it sort of begs the question, well, what's good about these? And I think ultimately that the answer, you know, the very short answer is, these are the ways through which we become holy. These are the ways in which we become healed, we become whole, when we become the women that we desire to be. I mean, this has been one of the fascinating pieces, is just the fact that women long to be treated with respect and feel like they are dignified, and yet everything that we're doing is undermining that effort. You know, that we're turning ourselves sort of into beasts instead of you know, something much more, you know, elevated that we're intended to be. So I think that that's you know, have to ask that question of what's being attacked and why is it being attacked. But I think that there is also something incredibly hopeful about looking at Our Lady and her responses to all these, again, going back to her as this model. And, it was funny, I wrote this book and I sent it off to the publisher. And I have these 3 chapters in the book where I discuss the desires of every female heart. And one of them is to be known and loved. The other is to do the good. And the third is to be beautiful. And I can talk about those more in a minute. But after the book was sent off, I was in a hotel with my daughters, and someone had just said, "Oh, you should watch the Hallmark Channel." And I had never seen the Hallmark Channel before. So the 3 of us sat and watched 2 movies of the Hallmark Channel. And then it was time to go to bed. And then one of my daughters was up in the middle of the night throwing up. So we watched 2 more movies of the Hallmark Channel. And, by the 4th one, you sort of figure out what's going on in these films. But I just cracked up because I realized, like, they've just used this recipe that I just outlined in my book, that here's a woman, she wants to be known and loved. She wants to do good. She's like saving a library or her family farm or something. And she wants to be beautiful while she's doing it. None of these women are homely or unattractive or, not dressed well. And, but the 4th thing, and I don't think I highlighted this well enough in the book, is that we want a happy ending. And, this is one of the beauties of Christianity is we know how things end. They don't end in despair and brokenness and woundedness. That's not the final piece of the story, but we know that it ends with heaven and with this
right.
unity that we have with all of those that we love and with God and the saints and in this sort of perfect happiness and place of healing. So anyway, I just cracked up because it's like, this is why the Hallmark Channel is making so much money, because they have figured out these desires of the human heart. And so I was very reassured that there was something right about my book when I realized that I was on the same page as Hallmark Channel. But the point is, I think that these have been really wildly neglected in our culture when we're looking at them, when we're talking about careers. I mean, they're sort of there. And even looking at these early feminists, you could see certainly the desire to do good. I mean, all these women thought that they were doing amazing work by taking women to get illegal abortions and that kind of thing. They just didn't have a sense of what the good was. So I think that desire is there, and you can certainly see it among millennials that, they want to change the world. They want to make a difference in the world. And that's a very inborn, also noble kind of desire that they have. But you're not going to do that if you can't figure out what the good is in the first place. And of course, this is the gift of Christianity and certainly the gift of the Blessed Mother and how we do that. So I think we've been told that the good looks a certain way, and yet what is authentically good looks quite different. And those are the pieces that we have to put back together, because Christians in general have been painted very much as, very doormat-y kind of women. I always laugh. I have the comments that I get on some of my articles that I've written are just hysterical. I don't read all of them all the time, but one went off about how I must not be able to make my own grocery store list, and my husband must have to tell me how to clean our home, and it's pretty comical. But it's just what it shows is how much the elite women of our culture have been able to sort of suck all the air out of the room, and all that's left is, if you're not this kind of woman, then you must be that kind of woman. And so, the mind loves to go to extremes. And so we don't even have a place in our brains to sort of think about what a different kind of woman might look like. And I think that that's really where we have our work cut out for us. But again, we have to sort of address the brokenness that women are experiencing and try and help them figure out how to move beyond that in a way that they may have never seen before in a woman. And yet we know that it's out there. We just have to help them find it.
I love that. I also love that those are the things you noticed in the Hallmark movies, because I always noticed that the recipe for a perfect Hallmark movie is the, washed up childhood star, a small town, and a nice looking guy.
Yep, exactly. Yes,
You read more into it than I did. So.
Yes. Well, maybe I was looking for it too, but
oh no, it's I see it now.
Yeah. No, that's really funny.
Oh my. Well, so you mentioned that you have daughters then. Both Beth and I are first-time mothers. I just had my little girl in July.
Yes,
So she's
congratulations.
just 3 months old, and Beth is about to have her first child, I think in February, right?
Yep.
Oh, that's so great.
So, we're going through these, we're coming into these ideas on our own, but then now, at least for myself, I'm trying to think, oh my word, how do you raise a girl in today's culture where she's going to be at every single turn, she's going to be, indoctrinated with all these ideas that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how are you raising your girls to kind of reject this and to push away the peer pressure and, I'm sure their own little friends are already, spouting these ideas to them. So how are you doing that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I actually have 2 girls and 2 boys. So I think in both directions, how do I raise my girls so that they are not affected by this, but also my boys. I don't want them to feel like they have to apologize for being boys and, sort of buy into this toxic masculinity idea. So it's obviously an incredible challenge. I took a picture a few months ago of a display at Barnes and Noble of all these books for young girls. And of course it was, Chelsea Clinton's book and that book, Strong is the New Pretty. And, it was just one of these things where I was like, there is nothing in this that I would even remotely consider spending money on because it was just all the same, it's just starting younger and younger. Let's kind of start the indoctrination earlier.
There's a book called Woke Baby out there. So.
It is, and the baby looks so angry. I mean, I thought, look through the pictures of Woke Baby, and it is hysterical. Or the feminist baby, maybe I have it wrong, but there's one that I remember seeing in the airport about a year ago, and I looked through the pictures and I was like, even feminism makes babies look angry and mean. It's really funny. But yeah, I mean, we homeschool, so that's one advantage that I have is just the capacity to be able to control what they're getting. I mean, it's not because I wouldn't love to send them to school. It's just we don't have good options, for various reasons. But I think that has helped a lot. The other thing I do a lot is, my oldest daughter is 10 years old and she probably knows more about feminism than, half the population of the world does. Just because I talk to her a lot about it and just point things out. And I'll, if there's a commercial that I don't agree with, I'll explain to her what's going on and how they're trying to manipulate the buyer through this. And, even that trend of, every white guy that you see on a TV commercial is going to be an idiot. And there's got to be a woman that's going to save him, so she's aware of these subtle ways. Both my daughters are these subtle ways that they're trying to be manipulated. The other thing that we do is just to make sure that they do have great access to stories about real women. Just there's such a great literary history there. Everything from Jane Austen to Little House on the Prairie. All these kinds of stories that are actually showing what womanhood can look like, and not in a doormatty kind of fashion at all, but in a way that you see character flaws and you see characters develop and all of that. So I think that's the other piece of it. But yeah, it's incredibly challenging, I think, for all of us. And I guess that's again where even we pray nightly rosary. And I know for a fact that has been an incredible gift for us and has buffered us from so many things. But yeah, especially for my daughters to have that just ingrained habit that's just what we do at night. And they know they're learning who Our Lady is, and they're even just to see that the spiritual fruits. I know one of my daughters broke her arm, same elbow, twice, 1 year, and then 2 years later she broke it even worse and had to have surgery with pins put in and everything. And I was teasing her. I said, your guardian angel is not doing a very good job. And she said, no, it's okay. And I said, no, really, we need to talk to your guardian angel about this. And she said, well, when I did my first communion, I told Jesus that I would suffer for him. And I just thought, that didn't come from me. I know I would never have told my daughter to ask for that on her first communion. And I just thought there's all these things that are happening because she has this relationship with Our Lady that isn't mediated through me, but is directly coming from her praying the rosary. So anyway, it's things like that I think are, knock your socks off as a parent when you can see that they have their own faith and it's not just, coming from mom.
I'm going to start crying. Oh my word.
So
That's
beautiful.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Only we could all be like that.
I know, exactly. And believe me, she
Oh.
has her moments when she doesn't want to be suffering for Jesus, but yeah, it's pretty incredible to see those glimmers through, daily life.
Wow.
All right. So one final question for you. And we would just like to know a little bit more about your new book. Sort of a chance for you to do a little plug for it too,
Great.
to sell it, because
Yeah.
it's kind of working into what you're saying here. So
Yeah. The new book is called Theology of Home: Finding the Eternal in the Everyday. And I'm glad you brought this up, because this book I think on a very superficial level, it kind of just looks like fluff. There's 100 pictures in it, and then some just beautiful reflections about home and how really our homes are meant to be a foreshadowing of heaven, and how do we get there, and why is that the case? And kind of, it's like a home design book, but instead of asking the how, we're asking the why, and just kind of going deeper. And we knew this is a book for busy moms, so we didn't want to make it too onerous and, feel like you have to get a study guide and, all that for it. But we just wanted it to be something that were beautiful stories and ideas that you could sort of take into your own home and make your own. But what's fascinating is I know that this book would never have come about if I had not done all this work on the anti-Mary. And I've just spent so much time thinking about how is it that women are absorbing ideas? How is it that we've communicated all of these awful Marxist ideas and, the ideas of Margaret Sanger and whatnot? And, the way that these women were successful in getting these ideas spread was through magazines, through very visually appealing products, and also television shows and pop music and whatnot. But, these women weren't reading Marx and Sanger. They were reading Cosmo and Vogue. And, that's how these ideas have become so widespread. And I think just as Catholics, we have just kind of fallen off the job, because we tend to believe that if we just put out enough logical, rational, reasonable ideas, that they will kind of be disseminated through the culture. But when you're living in a culture that's post-rational, that's post-logical, you have to come at things in a very different direction. And this was, been my whole journey of, I have a PhD in philosophy, and then the realization that I can't use this, that this is not going to be a helpful tool to help me evangelize and bring healing to other women. I had to find a different route to get to that. So that's really what Theology of Home is this effort to approach women at a place that already feels natural. Our homes are such a great starting point. I think you could probably talk to anybody about their home, and either they would lament certain things about it, or they would love certain things about it. But there could be a real conversation there that you could have with somebody about their home, or their favorite home shows, or decorating ideas. And I think that that's where we need to start. Really, is looking at how do we spread these ideas through beauty. And even in the book, we have images that I know aren't in women's magazines. We have pregnant women featured. We have people praying. We have dads looking like dads and not looking like wimps. We have a lot, large families, a lot of kids, and they look happy and they're not a disaster.
Not freaks.
They're not freaks, and there's just this great joy to the book. So we wanted to just go on offense. I think, again, we play defense so much with the church in terms of defending it and apologetics. But what we haven't realized is that, we have this incredible evangelical tool right at our fingertips, and that's called women. We bring people into our homes all the time, and we don't realize the power of that. So we can invite people over for dinner, and they will come. We might invite them to Mass and they would never come. But if we can get them into our homes, we can tell a story there that, isn't going to be told in the public square. So I think that's what this new book really, and this effort is to sort of, how do we approach women, and not just Catholics, but I think Catholics need to be fed too. I think that's the other thing, is you always hear, oh, well, you're just preaching to the choir. Well, the choir needs some preaching. The choir is out there really struggling. And how do we help Catholic women realize that they're not alone, that they don't have to feel like they're kind of these social freaks because they don't fit into the Protestant stuff. They don't fit into the secular stuff, but we've got our own stuff. How do we like start cultivating that and giving it to them in a beautiful way? So anyway, I think it's just been a fun project, but it's also been, one of those things that people have been really sitting up and taking notice because it's been selling so well. And people are, I think women are just starving for it. And of course, I've had plenty of men read it because of the interviews that I'm doing, and they seem to love it too. So, yeah, I think that there's just something universally appealing about home, but also just the fact that we have all of these beautiful ways to talk about it and to describe it and to understand it theologically, and then the comparison between the church and all these transcendentals of, we can talk about light in our homes, we can talk about light in the church, we can talk about light in the scripture. There's just all these very rich ideas that I think are what we go into. And so it's just fun to really help people get to that place where they feel creative instead of anxious and afraid. And that's what so much of our content is doing right now, is making people anxious and afraid. And that's really stifling, I think, especially to a soul that's trying to grow with God. You're not going to grow deeper when you're feeling that kind of anxiety. But if you're back to this place where you feel like you can be creative and loving and giving yourself in very personal ways, there's something important about that. And I think that's really where evangelization happens, when we are in that mode, in a healthy pattern instead of the fearful pattern.
Well, first of all, anyone who's read one line of your work will know that none of your work is going to be fluff. So don't even worry about that. And also, your book is selling well, because I ordered it and I'm having to wait like 2 weeks for it. And I'm just sitting on pins and needles.
Right. Where is it? Yeah. No, it keeps selling out.
That's good.
Yeah. I think the publisher keeps telling Amazon, buy more. And they're like, no, we're only buying this many. And then they run out in a week, in 2 days. So yeah.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But I think, oh my word, I think you're so right on. And I think, at least for me, I won't speak for Beth, but when you get woke to this whole feminist ideology, you start asking these questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So like you said, you can find tons of TV shows, tons of magazines on how to decorate your home.
Right.
Or how to design your home in a beautiful way. But it doesn't tell you how to make a home, especially if you're Catholic.
Right.
How do you do these traditions? How do you start them? How do you keep them going? What traditions are good and fruitful? And so I think this is not just preaching to the choir, it's giving water to parched people in the desert. So I'm excited.
No, and I think we are starving. I mean, even just looking at Joanna Gaines' success, I mean, she was polling more popular than Oprah at one point. I haven't checked recently.
Wow.
But here's this woman that, by all accounts is a pretty ordinary woman. And, she's clearly Protestant. She clearly loves children, loves her own children. And the fact that people are so drawn to that, I'm just praying, producers will start paying attention, that there really is this thread of women who long for that. But I think also just even, how do we defend homemaking? This is not some sort of awful imprisonment sentence that you get when you have to be home with your kids. But this is an incredible opportunity to gift amazing things. And, even in the church, I think that there's kind of this, it's not spoken about, but this sort of underlying idea that, our homes need to be austere, and they need to, that it's okay if they're shabby, and it's okay if they're a mess, this sort of, and I'm homeschooling mom, so our house is a mess constantly. So I'm not critical of that, but the point being that there isn't a sense that this is an important piece, that our homes really are a sanctuary where, it's an incredible gift to give comfort and a sense of safety and nourishment, all of these things to the people that we love, rather than mayhem and chaos. And even just kind of this sense of, you have to live in a way that looks like you're austere or something. So, not recognizing that these, throw pillows are important, and there's something about them, the well-curated home, even if it is not luxurious, that goes into it that a woman can bring to it in a way that, men don't. And, so this isn't going to come at the parish level, but we have to do this for each other as Catholic women and support each other in this way, because it's not coming in this specific mode from anywhere else, I think, at this point.
Wonderful. Beth, do you have any other questions?
No, just thank you so much. Everything you said. You say it so beautifully. When you say the stuff, I'm
Absolutely.
like,
Oh,
this
goodness.
is
Well,
exactly
thank
what I
you.
mean, but I could never say it as
Oh,
eloquently.
that's so great. Well, I've had a lot of time to think about it, and a lot of time to talk about, and I always feel like I'm being a little bit too long-winded. So thank you for your forbearance. But yeah, no, it's really exciting to sort of think about just having a new way to support women. And we know a woman is healthy and happy and ordered. It's infectious, and that's how the faith has spread in the past, and that's how I think it can happen in the future. Is to give women back what's been taken from us, and not in a way that we want to go back to the 1950s, but in a way that's new, and that that's the beauty of the Holy Spirit, is we don't have to go back and look like something of old necessarily, but it can have this fresh feeling and feel vibrant and life-giving again.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so very much for
My
coming on with us
pleasure.
today again. This has been an enormous pleasure, and we hope you can do it again sometime in the future.
I'd love to. Thanks so much, ladies.
All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode from Freed From Feminism. Tune in again in another couple of weeks for another episode, and we will see you soon. God bless.